G'day everyone, welcome to another edition of Guvs Hero Review videos. Today we are going to continue in our Zombies series, taking a look at the 5-star legendary yellow hero, Hatchet, the Carpenter Zombie. So Hatchet is available for summons from the Zombie Outbreak portal, which we saw there. It comes around once every 12 weeks. The portal itself hasn't got great odds. We can see that there is no featured hero, which definitely reduces the chances of getting a specific hero. But the general odds themselves are 1.2% chance to get a legendary zombie hero. So to put that in perspective, if you were to do 100 summons in this portal, you would have a 70% probability of getting any of the 5-star zombie heroes. But if you were hunting a specific one, such as Hatchet, you would only have a 10.3% probability of getting that specific zombie hero. So not great odds if you are chasing a specific hero, and that's mostly on the back of the fact there are no featured heroes in this portal. The zombie family itself has got something of a complicated past. Originally, there were 4 zombie heroes, and they were only available for to get through cashing in zombie badges, which you earned from the zombie spec up. That came around once a month. In 2021 though, they overhauled the entire thing and basically created a discrete Zombie Outbreak event that we have today. They then took those 4 original zombie heroes, added them to the portal, and chucked in 14 new heroes of various different rarities. And then they expanded the portal twice again since then, in September 2022 and March 2023. So Hatchet himself, he was part of that last release. So he's the most recent of the zombie heroes added to the game. His artwork, I'm just going to flip over to that. Ooh, where are we going? Stay with me for a sec. All right, his artwork is shown here. So we can see that he's got some creepy... I don't know, axe murderer style vibes. He's got like an apron on, which definitely has some blood stains on it. Not sure about this little tomato capsicum thingy down the front here, but yeah, that's his artwork with an accoutrement of axes and various other tools that are not really suited to a carpenter. But anyway, that's his artwork. So thank you, Pooflinger, for passing this one along. I do not have a copy of Hatchet, so yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, pause it if you wish to, but otherwise we'll head back over to his skill and his card. So he is a member, as I said, of the zombie family, which means that Hatchet is granted a 50% reduction in turn-based status effects. So this is things like burn, bleed, poison, toxic, all those sort of things. There's also a stat bonus to his attack stat if there are 2, 3, 4, or 5 unique members of the zombie family in battle. So that's a plus 3, 6, 9, or 12% attack boost for 2, 3, 4, or 5 unique zombies. So they do have to be unique heroes. You can't bring along 2 copies of Hatchet, so it's got to be someone like Hatchet and Billy Bob, or Hatchet and Ember, for example. In terms of his personal stats, Hatchet comes in with 697 attack, 788 defense, and 1483 HP. So there is a little bit of a skew going from his attack stat towards that defense stat. It is only moderate, it's nothing too massive, but it is there. His charge speed itself is set to 55, which is average speed, and requires 10 tiles to charge, or 5 ghosted tiles. The speed break, it does only need +3, which you can do using any of the speed weapons in the game. Alternatively, you can squeak across the line if you get the 4% class node. The 4% charge generation node, which is at +20 on his class tree. The double break requires +10 speed improvement, which you can't actually do with weapons. There is a situation where if you put on the +7 Tris Vector weapon, so that's the 4-star speed gun, and then also have the +4% charge generation node at node 20, you do just barely squeak across the line to getting the double break. So the speed node, it does have some relevance if you're wanting to be selective about where your speed weapons go, or if you're wanting to really double break him. But it is a lot of emblems to assign to one hero, so it's 1500 emblems, so it may not be worthwhile to you. You'll just have to make that choice. On the topic of his class, Hatchet is a member of the Engineer class, which means that he has a chance to summon a turret minion after receiving damage from any source. So the turret minion itself, it's got 15% health and 18% attack, which is inherited from the owner's stats. I generally like this talent because the minion itself is pretty beefy. It's pseudo healing, so it applies even in all of the tournament settings, and the trigger can come from any damage source, so it could be tiles, skills, ailments, other minions, you name it. If it does damage, it can trigger the engineer turret. The downside is that it can only proc once in a turn, so it doesn't matter how many instances of damage you take, you will only get one minion at most per turn. In terms of a specific emblem path, let's just have a look. I'm just going to pull up Vivara, so please pretend that this is what are we doing? Please just pretend that this is Hatchet, because I don't have a copy of him in my roster. So by way of an emblem path, I would go an attack route, and I would focus on HP when there's options between the two paths having attack. And the reason for that is because the minor HP improvements is going to make his turret minion slightly better. So what it looks like is it looks something like this. So we are following and picking up any node that's got attack on it, and where there's the two directions where we've got two choices, I went for the HP side. So me personally, I probably wouldn't push him to plus 20. The double speed breaker would be nice, but I don't know, it's a lot of emblems. It could be worthwhile, but I don't know, you'd have to make that decision yourself. So if you were going to keep going, it would sort of probably take the defense node and then pick up the speed one on the very bottom. So yeah, that's what I do in an emblem path. So pause it if you need to, but otherwise, let's keep going with his skill. So now we just got to find him. Oh, that was convenient. So his skill is titled Hack and Chop, and at level 10 skill and 55 charge speed, it will deal 360% damage to the target. It will then apply a bleed ailment doing minus 309 HP over 3 turns. If the target already has a bleed ailment, it will do a bleed burst effect, which will double the bleed damage and deal it instantly. It will then also clear any pre-existing bleed ailments from the target. The other two things is that it will apply a plus 49% defense buff to the caster for 3 turns and add 380 armor to the caster immediately. So a little bit going on there. So let's start with his damage output. So damage is difficult to to reliably calculate, because there's things like RNG that feed into it. But what we can do to analogously look at their damage output is we can calculate their attack power, which is just you take their attack stat multiplied by the percentage in their special skill. So we can see Hatchet comes out with an attack power of 2,509. If we normalize that against his speed, and divide by the number of tiles to charge his skill, that comes out in an attack power per tile of 251, which brings him in relatively all right in the scheme of things. It's sort of middle of the pack when you look at all of the possible options, and it's also roughly the middle of the pack when it comes to the base damage output. So he's there at number 7 of the base damage outputs. It is a substantial step back from the top of the pack. So if you look at the ones above him, you've got, Tornado's doing 322 compared to his 251. Stinger variant 292. Cooper, when he's hitting less than 50% health, is 415 attack power per tile. So there is a step back, but it is still decent direct damage. It comes in middle of the pack, as I said. Lots that are less good than him. The bleed burst is sort of the next thing in his skill, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because it is a little bit complicated, but it is also really simple. So essentially, the basics of it is if there is no bleed ailment on the target gets a bleed ailment. That does 309 HP over 3 turns, so 103 health loss per turn. If there is a pre-existing bleed ailment, all of the bleed ailments are cleared, and Hatchet will deal an immediate doubling of his bleed damage instantaneously. So at level 10 skill, this is 309 HP loss multiplied by 2, so that's minus 618 instant damage. For reference, if we were to do some very rough back calculation for the damage calculation, this works out as being roughly a 430% snipes worth of damage onto the target, on top of his already 360% snipe. So when you get the bleed burst triggering, you essentially double his attack power, and it goes all the way up to somewhere in the regions of 500, 550, which, if you reflect or rewind a little bit, puts him at the top of that leaderboard in terms of the instantaneous damage output. That is obviously only if there is the bleed burst. So a couple additional notes I'll make about the bleed burst ability. Number one, the bleed scales depending on the special skill level. So at 10 out of 10, it's going to deal the full 309 bleed or 618 bleed burst. But if you're not at 10 out of 10 skill, it does drop off a fair bit. So as an example, my Aquani, he has exactly the same ability. His skill is at 8 out of 10, which is only 279 or 558 bleed damage compared to, so that's 558 compared to 618. All right, so it is a bit of a drop off when you're not at 10 out of 10. The second thing I want to really highlight is that there are a huge amount of things that are considered as a bleed ailment. So there are things such as bleed burst. So if you trigger Hatchet in previous cast and then go again, counts as a bleed ailment. There is the regular bleed ailment, so you can get it from someone like Naja. There's a resetted bleed ailment, such as what you got on Serpent or Night Owl. There's the Master Weapon Quest bleed ailment. So you've got all three rarities. You can get a bleed ailment from the Master Weapon Quest gun. So you've got the green 3-star Bennett, you've got the 4-star purple BB19 Buffalo, and there's the 5-star green CRB Carnivore. I will just show you what I mean by that in case people aren't familiar. So you've got the CRB Carnivore, this Rend, it counts as bleed. All right, you've got the Buffalo, Rend counts as bleed. You can see it in the skill there, bleed damage. And then there's the 3-star Bennett, also has bleed. So any of those weapons, they will trigger the bleed burst as well. All right, so there's a lot of ways you can do it, and there is one more as well, which is the assault class heroes. They actually count as bleed damage. So you can see it there, 5% chance to apply bleeding from normal attack, or blah, 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 blah. So there are a huge amount of ways that you can trigger the bleed burst by having a pre-existing bleed ailment on the hero, right? It's not like a very niche effect. You can do it in so many different ways, right? Personally, because I use Aquani a lot, I tend to pair him either with Naja or with another hero that's equipped with the CRB Carnivore. All right, you can do it yourself if you pair Hatchet up with someone with the 4-star Buffalo, right, a purple hero, boom, bleed burst every single time. All right, it is actually really, really easy to trigger. The third thing that I really want to highlight as well with the bleed burst is that it will clear all bleed ailments from the target. So if the trigger you're using to get the bleed burst is a previous cast of Hatchet, you might want to just delay firing until the bleed ailment has almost run its course. But better situation is when you pair it with a low output bleed option, so then you don't really have to wait and waste potential damage on the target enemy. Quickly moving on from the bleed burst and addressing the final two parts of his skill. These two parts are the self-application of a 49% defense buff and the provision of 380 armor instantaneously. So the defense buff itself, it is percentage based, which is great. It's the better option as it will continue to scale with the equipping of emblems and weapon bonuses and such. 49% is on the upper end of the spectrum, but again, it is only for himself. It doesn't provide any benefit to the rest of the team, so that is something to note. The armor as well, similarly, it's a nice little bonus. 380 armor, it's about 25% of his base HP as pseudo healing, but again, it's only for himself, so I can't really compare him as a pseudo healer or anything like that because he's not helping anyone other than himself. So overall, Hatchet is a very comparable hero to Aquani, all right? Both of them have relatively middling initial direct damage, right? You've got 230 attack power per tile on Aquani versus 251 on Hatchet here. Both of them have the bleed burst. The points where they kind of differ a bit is, you know, their classes. So Equani is recon class. I see that as superior to the engineering class. The speeds, Equani is 1 tile faster than Hatchet is. The family bonuses, the mutant goon is generally a lot better than the zombies reduced DOT. And then also the secondary effects are quite different. So Hatchet gains the survivability, but Equani gains the accuracy shield. So I'd say Hatchet is better on the survival than the accuracy shield. But overall, I'd say they're very, very close, and this is reflected in my grading. They're so close to being equivalent, but I feel like Equani might have a little bit of an edge based on his speed, but it's not much. So similar to Equani, Hatchet I see as being a very, very good attacking hero. The bleed burst is phenomenal. It is a huge amount of damage, and it is so easy to trigger. Like, it's really, really easy. The survivability conditions that he gives himself, they are also great. It does mean that he's more likely to cast Bleed Burst 2 or 3 times, getting that bonus instantaneous damage a couple times throughout the fight. So overall, for Hatchet's grading, I'm going to give him an A grade for War and Raid attacks. This is on the back of that Bleed Burst predominantly, and this is because it is, I see it so easy to get the bleed effect going in a battle. For War Machines, I'm going to give him a B grade. He drops off a fair bit there. He's still got okay damage, and the bleed burst is still all right, but his attack stat is slightly reduced. Eventing down to a B-. He's a target-only shooter, so there's no real way around that. And War and Raid defenses, though, I'm going to give him a C grade. And this is, again, because it's hard to trigger the bleed burst on defense because the AI sucks at timing and it sucks at targeting. So if you are going to put him on a defense team, he'd have to be in a flank position, but you need to have an AoE bleed hero also on the defense. So as an example, you might need a bleed hero at left flank or the tank position, and then Hatchet at right flank, for example. But he's not a good defensive hero. Even though he's got defensive stats, the AI just doesn't do targeting and timing. For tournaments, in the Bloody Battle, I'm going to give him an A- and a C grade. A- for attack and a C grade for defense. It is still bleed, so it's quite effective, but he does lose the armor generation part of his skill. In buff boosters, I'm going to give him an A- on attack and a C grade on defense. And charged attack, I'm going to give him an A grade for attack and a C grade for defense, because he does pick up a bit of a speed improvement there. So overall, for Hatchet's grading, that comes in at a B+ for attack and a C grade for defense. And that concludes the content that I have for this review of Hatchet. As always, these are just my personal opinions on them. These heroes, I do love hearing your thoughts and feedback on them, so please do jump down to the comments section of the video and leave me a note there. I love reading them, and I do try to reply to as many of you as I can. If you did enjoy the video, feel free to like it, subscribe to my channel and all of that, but most importantly is to share the video around, because realistically, if it was useful for yourself, it's also probably going to be useful to the people that you play with as well. So yeah. Thank you once again for tuning in and joining me for this review. I hope that I will catch you again soon in another video, but until then, good luck, stay safe, and happy gaming. Cheers, bye.